Hello, and welcome to the Billing Invoice tutorial. This feature allows you to record charges and payments for your clients. You will be able to generate a professional invoice document that can be emailed to your client for payment. You will also be able to see at the practice level what all your client balances are and who is past due. You can also generate yearly reports to track your income and write-offs. The first step is to open a client record and navigate to the Billing tab under the Tasks and Billing section. Next, press Add Billing Invoice. The first field on the Billing Invoice form here is for entering the beginning date of service for the charges that will be added. So in this case, I'm going to choose yesterday. All the other fields at the top are automatically calculated based on the charges and payments we will enter below. The last payment date field is also auto-populated by the system by pulling the date of the most recent payment that the client has made. This way, at a glance, you can easily see if this client is past due and how much past due they are. Next, we can add a diagnosis code. This is completely optional. You can still generate an invoice if you do not add any diagnosis codes. Adding a diagnosis code can be important if your patient plans on submitting the invoice to their insurance company for reimbursement. It is also valuable for your own purposes so you can track the nature of the bill and remember why you may have charged more or less than you normally do. For instance, if the client was high risk, you may include some diagnosis codes that indicate what risk factors were involved, such as high blood pressure or type 2 diabetes. For this example, I'm going to choose encounter for antenatal screening for mother, and let's say gestational edema. And so now that those are added, we can move to the charges section. And this charges section currently doesn't have anything in it. You'll notice the diagnosis code section has a 2 to the left of it that indicates there are 2 entries under it. If you have already added procedure codes to a visit record, then it can be copied to this invoice by pressing the Copy Bill Codes From button. It will come up with a list of all your visits and even insurance entries that you've created. So if you've already created an insurance bill that has the codes, or if you have a visit that you just did that has the codes, you can copy it from that visit. Pressing the Add Charges button causes the procedure codes window to appear. The first thing we see is all of your favorite procedure codes. Actually, they may not be your favorite. In fact, you may hate these codes. That is why it is important to take some time to go to the bill code screen and customize your favorite list. We will step you through that at the end of this tutorial. At this point, I can choose an option from the favorites list, or I can scroll down to the CPT table of contents. From this table of contents, I can navigate to any code in the entire AMA CPT code database. Lastly, I can search for a code by typing either part of the code or any illness or condition in the search box at the top here. So in this case, I typed in pregnancy, and we can see all the bill codes in the entire CPT database that have the word pregnancy. Or I might type lactation. And in this case, it just brings up the favorite that we have. This is not actually from the CPT database. So it also searches your favorites. Most of the time you will choose a code from your favorites list. The codes in this list do not have to be CPT codes. You can create your own custom charges, such as this standard visit that we have at the bottom, A0001 standard visit, $150, or this basic client package I also added. So you can add any of your own visits or packages or anything you like. And we'll again show you how to do that at the end of this tutorial. Generally though, it is a good practice to use CPT codes even if you don't bill insurance. That way your patients can try to obtain reimbursement from an insurance cost sharing or HSA plan. They may also obtain retroactive coverage from a plan such as Medicaid months down the road. Official codes are also valuable when it comes to providing proof for medical write-offs on a personal tax return. Any bill code entries here that have a fee at the end surrounded by square brackets will cause the invoice to auto-populate with that fee amount. So I'm going to choose a pretty standard evaluation and management code, often used for well woman visits. Which in this case will be 99395. Notice how the $200 is at the end. Now I'm going to add another charge. And in this case, I'm going to use a lactation class session. Now I'm going to go from left to right and make sure I fill in all the applicable fields. The first field here is labeled date, and it is used to indicate the date of service of this charge. I can tap on it and set it to yesterday like this. The next two fields were auto-populated from my bill code selection a second ago. Now I will tie my procedure code to the diagnosis code by tapping on the first DX field here. In this case, I'm going to associate both diagnosis codes with this charge. Next we have the fee field, which is auto-populated from the selection that we made earlier because it had the fee in square brackets. The units I will leave alone, and the rest of the fields are automatically calculated. And we'll see that when we press save once we've completed entering all of our data. Now I will check my second charge and set its diagnosis code. Notice how there are red buttons at the end that allow you to delete each entry. Actually, it looks like somehow I got a double entry in here. So I'm going to delete this second one. It's a duplicate. Now we can add any payments or discounts that need to be applied to these charges. So let's say in this case, this patient paid for the $30 lactation class when they walked in yesterday. Then they visited with you for the well woman visit, and then as they were leaving, they paid only $150 of the $200 charge because that's all they said they had that day. First, I'll set the payment date to yesterday. Then I will choose payment cash, patient payment cash. I will enter $30. And I will choose to apply this to the $30 charge, which is obviously the lactation visit charge that we entered above earlier. And I'm going to apply the whole $30 to this. And the reason this is laid out in this manner is because alternatively I could put in the whole amount that they paid that day, which would have been the 150 plus 30, which would be 180, and still just apply 30 to this lactation visit, and then apply the remaining 150 to the well woman visit, which has a balance of 200. Notice how the balance for the lactation class is at 0 now. That's because we applied the $30 to it a second ago. So I'm going to apply this $150 to this balance. And so now there's nothing in unapplied. I still have a balance of $50 for that one, but there's no unapplied amount. But that's not the way I'm going to do it today, because that's a little bit complicated. And so you can just forget everything I just talked about there, and let's sort of backpedal and take a simpler approach. So I entered the $30 and applied it to the lactation visit and applied the whole $30 amount. And then they made the second payment on their way out the door after the well woman visit. We'll say this was also in cash. And let's say this amount was $150. We'll apply it to the well woman $200 balance. And we applied the whole amount. So now we can press save at the top and make sure all the totals come out properly. Even on this top banner, which stays here on all these screens, shows the total charges for this client. So if you have 10 billing invoices, you'll see a lot of charges all added together, all summed up, and any adjustments or insurance payments or patient payments, and the remaining client balance. So in this case, we had the $230 charges. The patient paid $180, which leaves them with a balance of $50. That is also reflected on this invoice, where we can see the $230 charge column here, and the $180 payments here, and the $50 balance and the last payment date. If we go down and drill down into the charges, we can see how these fields also populated down at the charge level. This may seem a bit complex, but it's very powerful in that it allows you to assign payments to specific charges and keep track of what the balances are on specific charges, because it's very common and expected in the medical industry for patients to want to know what their balance is and what their balance is for specifically. Is their balance for the last visit they had, or was it for some labs? They want to know exactly what they have a balance for. And that's also important if they're going to get reimbursement from insurance. Lastly, we can press on the Send Invoice button, and we get a message indicating the invoice was successfully generated. Under the invoice send history, tap on the document thumbnail and choose View Document and then Print. And it operates this way, so you can send multiple invoices for the same entry, because over time you're going to enter more and more payments, possibly more charges, and want to regenerate the invoice and send it to the client. So to do that, as that message just suggested, we need to tap on the thumbnail, choose View Document, and review that everything we see here is accurate. Notice how the diagnosis codes are included here. I can tell that actually I missed associating the lactation class with the, I think I wanted it associated with the Z36 diagnosis code, so I can go back and change that. This will be a good example of how you can fix issues. And then press Send Invoice again. I can delete this first one just to avoid any confusion. And now that's properly reflected in the diagnosis code column for the lactation class charge. When this invoice prints, it's going to look a little bit more polished than this, because here we have editable text boxes that have a tan background. And so they will have a transparent background once the document is sent, whether you email it or print it. So you can edit any fields here on the fly just before you send it out. So that gives you a lot of power and authority over the situation, so that you can control exactly what the client sees and aren't limited to the tool. At the bottom here, you'll notice there's a notes section where you can enter in maybe a little note, such as some urgency if they're really past due. And this bottom part is so that they can enter in their billing information and then just send it back to you. So I'm going to press save. Oh, also notice you can use the scribble feature here, which is common throughout Mobile Midwife under documents. And maybe you want to circle this just to emphasize it, or possibly write another note and make it look more like you hand wrote it, so that they'll pay more attention to it. And so to email it, I can press here and choose email, print, or open in. And then you'll press done, and that's it. You may want to take a picture of the receipt or the check that they give you, or the receipt that you give them, or the check that they give you for your records. And you can do that simply by using the attached documents feature, which you're probably already familiar with, that allows you to take a photo directly from the client record, so it never touches your photos, your photo streams, or your cloud. It's strictly inside of our app, and it's secure. So now that we've completed the review of the billing invoice feature, let's go back to the bill codes, where you can edit the procedure, charges, and diagnosis codes that we mentioned earlier. So I'm going to press the home icon in the upper left corner, press on tasks and billing at the bottom, and then bill codes on the left. Then I'm going to press edit in the upper right corner. And you'll notice I can press any of these red buttons to delete an entry. So in this case, let's say I'll delete this one. And then I might want to reorganize some. And so I can grab one of these gripper buttons and slide it up or down to change the order. If I tap in any of the entries, I can change the verbiage. If I want to add a new entry, I can scroll down. And here at the bottom, I can begin to type my new entry. Notice how in the grade watermark here, it reminds us what the format needs to be most optimal. We want a numeric number followed by a hyphen, and then your description of the fee, and then the amount in brackets. The amount is editable after you add it as a charge. You can always change it in the invoice. So this would just be your suggested amount, or the common amount that you use in most cases. So in this case, I'm just going to add a test charge. And notice below here is the diagnosis code favorites. This is where you would obviously change what your diagnosis code favorite options are. And just like above, you can delete or move them or change their verbiage. So again, this is diagnosis code favorites down here, but above here we were working under the procedure code favorites, which is labeled here at the top. And once you're done, you just press done in the upper right corner, and now you've customized your list. Lastly, I want to review the billing tab here. We're down at the bill codes tab currently, but if we go up to billing, we can see the entry we recreated for Julia Holman and only one other entry. Unfortunately, we do not have more test data here, but you can get a basic idea of how this works and how you can isolate different sets of patients and who's past due and who is owing how much money and what's urgent for collections and so forth. And one way to do that is simply by tapping on the column headers, and it'll sort it. So in this case, I'm sorting by date of service. I can sort by last payment date. So particularly if something has an older date of service and also a old last payment date and a large balance, then that's something you want to make a top priority to reach out to that patient. You can also use the filter options we have above by pressing yes here. And so here you can narrow down the list to only show entries that have an outstanding balance. Over time, your billing summary will grow very large to potentially thousands of entries. And so once you set this filter option, it is saved even if you log out of Mobile Midwife. And it's also saved across all your devices. So that way you can make the billing summary more manageable across the entire practice by keeping certain settings that work well for you, the level of data that's in your practice. So very commonly you'll choose no or choose yes to only show entries with an outstanding balance, and then also put a date filter. Maybe after 12 months you have a practice or a policy where you write off the charge. You can also email the spreadsheet or open it into another app like a spreadsheet processor that you have also on your iPad. But you can email it to yourself and maybe open it in Excel. You can also tap on any of the clients here just to open directly to that client. And then we can open our invoice. So maybe it's been 12 months in one day and we've decided that we're just going to write off that last $50. And that leaves this patient with a zero balance. At the end of the year, or really at any time, you can go to the reports and generate a billing history report, which will generate a ledger in between the dates that you choose over here on the right, the from date and to date. It'll generate a ledger of all the charges and the payments and the write-offs, and it will total it all at the bottom. And you can export it as a Excel compatible file and use it for your taxes or your P&L statements, or just so that you can get a handle on where your business is and what your accounts receivables and your billing situation is. All right, that concludes this tutorial on the billing invoice feature with Mobile Midwife, Mobile Lactation Consultant, and Mobile Doula. If you have any other questions, always feel free to reach out to support. We're always happy to help. We also have many other videos on our website that you can also view to help you understand other similar features such as insurance billing. Thank you for watching.